Hello, everybody. This is the first video for the Psychology of Human Sexuality. I hope that you've looked at the material, including the syllabus and a brief presentation that I made on YouTube about that. Please read the syllabus fully. So let's talk about the basics of human sexuality. This is essentially a scaffold upon which you can place the material that we will consider in the class onto. So the first thing is to note that it's important, I think, that you pull out the PowerPoint and follow along with this video in the PowerPoint. That will solidify the information. That will help you decide what to write down and what not to. Okay? All right. So most people involved in the world of the education of human sexuality, sex therapy, and so on, along with other fields, will tell you the following, that it would make great sense, based on the research, that we include sex education at all levels of school, that it not be neglected or left to anybody anywhere. And so this is because we can do a lot of good in reducing the number of unwanted pregnancies, the age at which people begin to have sex increasing, the use of birth control increasing. All sorts of good things happen when you use comprehensive sex education methods. Not abstinence only. The research is very clear on that abstinence only programs, the ones that just tell people you don't do it, more or less, doesn't work. Comprehensive sex education, where we've looked at the data, tells us that it's a good way to approach this subject at all levels. Now, in grammar school, junior high, high school, those levels change in terms of what you say and how you present the material. And most of the time, what most of us don't understand is that when you have comprehensive sex education, the emphasis is on relationships and where sex exists in relationships, and saying no and how to know when to say yes. Okay, so this is comprehensive education is part of a broad spectrum of topics, all related to sexuality. Well, this is what the course is about. And because it's a psychology course, we're going to emphasize the psychology of human sexuality. Okay. So, do you have a sense of why you're taking this course? Is it a requirement? Is it an elective that you just jammed in there? Do you... Just be honest with yourself about that. That's fine. Do you think you have any myths about sexuality? Well, that's a trick question, isn't it? Because if you had a myth, you wouldn't know it was a myth. You would swear it was the truth. Is there anything you want to know more about? Anything in particular? Message me. All right. A lot of fields study this. Psychology, of course. Sociology, social work, medicine, anthropology, biology, history. They intersect with human sexuality in different ways and at different points. So, for example, medicine is about diagnosing problems associated with sexual functioning and then having solutions either in medications or in some kind of surgical procedures. And so that's an element that we will talk briefly about in various places, but that's not our emphasis. Our emphasis is on the way in which individuals and in the context of relationships relate to the topic of sexuality. Do you know what sex is? What's interesting is that if you ask 100 people to write a definition of sex, that you'll get different answers. You'll get some similarities, but you get different answers. So some people think French kissing is sex, or at least sexual, and there's no clear dividing line there for some. Some people think heavy petting is sex. Some people don't think oral sex is sex. Some people only think intercourse is sex. Here's a government definition, a person engages in sexual relations when the person knowingly engages in or causes contact with the genitalia, anus, groin, breast, inner thigh, or buttocks of any person with the intent to arouse or gratify the sexual desires of any person. Contact meaning the intentional touching either directly or through clothing. What an odd definition. But then government definitions often are. So the idea is, what do you think sex is? For you, what is it? Because when we use the term sex, we're actually talking about a broad range of behaviors that for some constitute individually their ideas about what sex are, but for others don't. Is sex kissing or stroking or rubbing through clothing or mouth on genitals or intercourse or anal sex? What is it? There are no sharp dividing lines, except in the minds of some. Okay. So, human sexuality is subject to a number of strong influences, and the first of that list is physical and biological functioning. And you will find out that as we move through the course, that the first 3 sections are about the biology and physiology of sexual functioning. Okay? We have to have the vocabulary. We have to understand what's what and who's who, how things work and how they don't work. But then on the list is the emotional, psychological condition of the individual, because we know that shifts in emotional states, shifts in stress levels, shifts in lots of different ways impact either positively or negatively sexual response and sexual performance. Social and cultural customs, norms, and prohibitions. They are in our heads. We don't even realize that, but they're there, and they impact sexual functioning. The status of the relationship at any given moment or period of time affects sexual functioning and desire and so on. Your relationship skills, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, all have an effect. Okay. So, if we look at the drive of sex, the first thing you want to notice is that sex is not the strongest drive that we have. Some people might think that it is. It's not an insignificant drive, but it's not the strongest drive. If you were intensely hungry or intensely thirsty or hadn't slept in a couple of days or were in fear because you had no safety, those things would override sexual interest for 90-some-odd% of people. So sex is driven by a number of needs beneath that, and one is our desire for closeness. Sex is a set of behaviors that induces a sense of closeness and attachment. It's a form of communication. It is a form of behaviors that generate a safety within the relationship at an emotional level. Of course, sex can be a procreative activity. Interestingly, though, you may know that humans and only one other animal, the bonobo monkey that we're aware of, are the only animals that have recreational sex. Humans have recreational sex most of the time rather than procreative sex. And then, of course, it's about pleasure. It could be a purely pleasurable thing. But, of course, all of these things are interwoven with each other, aren't they? And in the context of a really strong relationship that's close, it's sharing, it's communicative, can be all of these things. Okay, why is this important subject? Because sex that is going well in a relationship increases the pleasure in a relationship. It increases your sense of wholeness in the relationship. When sex is going well enough, it increases the intimate connection that you have. It's not just emotional sharing or doing things together. Those are components of intimacy, yes, but sexuality is another way that you develop these emotional ties. It's a statement that you are wanted by your partner and that your partner wants you. Sex is actually a buffer against life stress. Although, somewhat ironically, it's the it's the case that when humans are in a lot of stress, they don't typically want to be sexual, but it is a stress reducing behavior. Now, sex that isn't going well, problematic sex, can impact self-esteem. It can impact self-efficacy. You may recall that term from Intro to Psych, and certainly does not help the relationship. It makes the relationship less pleasurable. It's one of the first things that couples who are having trouble usually discuss. And so when therapists are talking to people about a sex problem, they walk in with some issue about their sexual behaviors and how that's not going well, we will evaluate things below that, like how do you talk about things with each other? Do you feel safe with each other? Are you committed to the relationship? Yeah. Do you trust each other? Those sorts of things. Okay. Things you might not know. The average adult couple has intercourse approximately 60 some odd times a year. Now that statistic is an average. It includes all ages from 18 to 80 plus. So it's not a significant number because it doesn't take into account age differences. Younger people who are in sexual relationships may be having a lot more than 60 events of intercourse per year, or someone who's 80 years old may be having far fewer. I don't know. It also does not take into account physical problems, disabilities, illnesses, social conditions, cultural stresses, and so on. That there are a number of things, and regionally it's different. It also doesn't take into account religious and political positions, which affect that, seemingly, by the data. Another interesting thing you might not know is that couples who choose to not have children have greater relationship satisfaction, and they have better sex. Well, they have more time, more privacy, more money. Yeah. Another thing you might not realize, but should, is that most MDs and DOs are doctors of osteopathy, they are equivalent to MDs in almost every way, function in the same ways, are not trained extensively in human sexuality. They have training in the anatomy of sexuality and the problems associated with sexuality, but urologists and OBGYNs are better specialists within MDs and DOs to handle that. But in terms of psychological issues and in terms of the person having the problem or the couple having an issue, shared issue, MDs and DOs are not trained to handle that. And they don't have time to do that. And they ordinarily don't want to talk about that. Now, reputable MDs and DOs will send you to someone who is an expert in those areas. And that's somebody in the psychology, counseling, or potentially social work area who has special training. Another thing you might not realize, and this comes up sometimes in sex therapy, is even in a highly sexual, committed, romantic love relationship, that individuals in the relationship continue to masturbate. It is not the case that people stop doing that. And the logic is very simple, we think, that it's related to if someone is happy in a relationship sexually, they'll have more sex than someone who's not happy, but they're sexually aroused and they have more periods of arousal when a partner's not around, or they like to have a private experience, which is different than a shared experience sexually. That's it. Okay. A few other things. You may have seen commercials on television with erection medications, and such as those for Viagra or Levitra, Cialis, and so on. And they appear to propose that these medications, or they leave you to think that these medications are cure-alls, 100% effective, and they're not. Somewhere between 60 or 65% to about 80 or 85% effective, at best. And so you can imagine that people who would have trouble even with these medications might become quite discouraged, and there is a percentage of, say, older males who continue to have problems getting erections, who are so disappointed that the Viagra doesn't work that they just stop trying, and this is devastating for them and their relationship. Another thing you might not know is that erection problems affect a fair percentage of men, beginning at a range 40 or 50, a range 40 or 50 on up, and it increases in terms of the incidence as you go up in age. Somewhere, the numbers vary. 1 in 5 men at 50, something like that. That number is variable, but it's 20%, 15, 20% is not a small number, especially if you're the one with the problem. Now, another thing to be reminded of is that things you might not know is that sexual satisfaction is not the same as orgasm, especially as you get older. Most couples are sort of driven to have an orgasm or give their partner an orgasm, and while that's a wonderful thing and it's an intensely pleasurable experience, you can have all the other benefits of sex without it, including closeness and cuddling and laughter, and sometimes things won't go just right for one or both of you, and that's okay. That's all right. Have fun. Be relaxed in spite of it. Another thing to keep in mind is that relaxation and emotional safety really are the foundations for good sex, and especially as you get older, because you'll have more incidences where things may not go quite right. Okay? All right. So let's talk about who's active at what ages sexually. Well, in the 70 to 74 age range, 30% of females are sexually active, but 2/3 of males are. In the 75 to 79 range, 22% of females are sexually active. That means we mean with a partner, and males are a little over 50%. So males at every age stage, particularly the next one at 84, where females around 10% are still active, almost half of males are still active, that's odd, isn't it? Well, think about it, though. Men don't live as long as women. There are fewer men, therefore, as you get older, on the dating market, men who are not attached, among the heterosexual females. If you think about non-heterosexual males, if you think particularly homosexual males, as they get older, their number of uncommitted homosexual males goes down. So they have trouble too. You see, yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of opportunity for dating for an unattached male who's 80 years old, if he wishes to date. Now, a couple of other things, and then we'll move to another subject. The next thing I want to say is controversial to some, but some of the terms we use for the kinds of relationships that people have that are sexual include those called hookup sex, just a sudden, let's get together and see how that goes. That's actually a predominant style in Iceland, wherein they have sex first and then decide if that's going to go well enough, maybe we'll date a little bit and see how that goes. That's a very common way to go about relationship building. In Iceland, we kind of have hookup sex, but do that more for, not for necessarily building a relationship. So hookup sex, recreational sex, where we're just having sex for the purpose of having sex, not so much in the context of a relationship, not in terms of a sudden sexual engagement. And then sexual friendships, best friends, friends with benefits, which is a misnomer. And then sex within a committed romantic relationship are all potentially positive variants anyway, but each of them assumes a different level and nature of risk. So if you are in a monogamous relationship and you know for a fact that neither partner has a sexually transmitted infection, then you're in a greater level of safety than any of the others levels of relationship or kinds of relationships. If you have a hookup sex with someone you don't know, then you're at risk, even if you use a condom, because some sexually transmitted infections are transmitted despite the use of a condom. And that oral sex does not protect you against anything, except, ironically, to a large degree, from HIV. But we still say, watch out. In Iceland, what's interesting, another reference to Iceland, is that the population of Iceland is so small, it's in the hundreds of thousands, that almost everybody knows everybody, or are semi-related to each other, so that there is actually a greater level of safety, but not complete safety, in hookup or recreational sex that they may engage in. Now, that risk has to be dealt with, and the individual and their honesty with their partners and their understanding of those risks is critical here, right? Okay. Now, a couple of things as a bit of an aside for men and women that they need to pay attention to, and this is on average, this is not every individual, of course. When we say average, or when we state something, it's the average, the norm, that we're talking about statistics. It doesn't refer to anyone in particular. We'll talk about exceptions and so on as we move forward. But for now, the average male needs to do some work in the United States on valuing emotional intimacy and closeness, and the value of physical affection not connected to sex, and perhaps non-quid pro quo sexual pleasuring. In other words, providing a sexual release for their partner and not expecting anything from them for themselves, you see. And the reason is because in heterosexual relationships, a male's emotional openness and connection is her turn on. I hear a bird outside. It's her turn. So your openness as a male and your connection to her is a turn on for her, on average. Now, women have the opposite in some ways. So heterosexual women need to learn to access their erotic energy. Some people call it an erotic identity. So that you initiate sex and that you say what you want. Yeah? Because your arousal is his turn on. Okay? So we want both men and women to take advantage of these opportunities to improve their sex lives by identifying some of these issues to work on. And it's not a lot of work. It's not a lot. On average, not a lot of work. Now, what are some requirements for sex that goes well enough? Let's talk about 6. Accurate information, number 1, about sexuality and how it goes. Sometimes people don't have accurate information. Some people don't have the very basics of information. And many people have lots of mythologies about sex. Number 2, an orientation towards sex based on pleasure, not necessarily pointed towards orgasm, but arousal, fun, love, lust. Okay? Number 3, developing your relationship and your concern and awareness of your partner to allow them to flourish sexually. Okay? Number 4, communicating your inner life, about communicating feelings about relationships, about sex, verbally and non-verbally. See. Number 5, being equally assertive as your partner, or more than. Just assertive meaning saying what you want, saying what you don't want. Just being kind, being open, and saying, I'd love to try this. And we have a whole section in this course on that one subject. And then the last one is accepting and understanding and appreciating the differences that you have with your partner. No one is the same. No one has the same level of desire for physical touch, affection, sexuality, timing, kind of sex. No 2 people have the same. That would be really strange if 2 people had the same. And you don't really know that for a number of months. Some people don't even show those differences until they're married, which is unfortunate. Okay. Here are some myths I'd like to present to you. These are myths that I have heard from others, either in sessions with people, from people just telling me myths that they had, sometimes students, sometimes friends, things that you read about that have been told. So here's a few, just a few. How about this one? Men always want sex. No, we don't. Men feel like they have to always want sex, but So do women. It's a misunderstanding that men and or women always want to have sex. Without an erection, a man is useless sexually. That's not true at all. If you're in love, you should always have great sex. No, that's not going to happen. Only women fake orgasms. No, that's not true either. You got to think about that one. Single folks have more sex than partnered folks. That's not true. Old people don't want sex. Nope. Masturbation causes blindness. Nope. That was a belief all the way up into the 30s, actually. Green M&Ms are aphrodisiacs. I've heard that one from a junior high school student. I suppose everyone wishes it were true. If you're a great lover, you should know what anyone wants sexually and how to please anyone. No. I shouldn't have to ask you for what you want. You should know. If you have to plan to have sex and it isn't spontaneous, then something's wrong. Nope, especially if you have kids or weird schedules. You better plan an evening together. Women don't like pornography? No, approximately 1/3 of all purchasers or viewers, I think it's viewers of pornography, are female. Most women orgasm through intercourse alone? No, actually, the majority of women cannot. Not reliably, anyway. If a woman stands up ever having sex, she won't get pregnant. If a man withdraws before he ejaculates, no pregnancy can occur. You can't get pregnant the first time you have sex. You can't get pregnant on a boat. Yes, I've heard that one. You can't get pregnant if you douche with Sprite or Coke right after intercourse. I would have thought it'd be Dr. Pepper, but hot tubs prevent pregnancy. Condoms are 100% effective? No. The way people typically use condoms, it's around 85% effective. If you use them correctly, yes, there's a correct way. Believe it or not. They are approximately up to 95% effective. So there's some risk anyway. That's why we want you to use 2 methods of birth control and think about the risks otherwise for sexually transmitted infections. Okay. So you have a history as a human being, and therefore you have a history as a sexual human being. You're a human being, and so you have a sexual history. As a child, at puberty, first nocturnal emission, or or menarche, your first period, your experience of sexual touch, wanted or not wanted, first oral sex or intercourse, first relationship in which there was sex. We all have varying histories, and they are on different timelines. You know, it's been observed that babies in the womb touch their genitals because it feels good. Likely. That's why they do it. So we know humans are sexual creatures, just like all other mammals. Okay, and to broaden the definition of sex, so do all creatures. I'm not sure viruses could be considered sexual, but maybe. To think about that one. And so we then have a sexual history that is enmeshed with things like your family history and what they told you, didn't tell you, and how they operated in the world. Your culture and subculture, your self-esteem, your body image, your religious beliefs, the political climate of the world and in your area, your experiences in the world personally, your education, the ability to think critically and understand what is good versus not good or bad evidence. Okay? One of the underlying goals of this material is to improve your critical thinking by giving you more accurate facts. Okay. So this is the first video. It's 30 minutes long, and I will give you the rest of it in video number 2. Talk to you later. Bye.